Imagenae, the beings of Planarcadia that populate the world and quite literally bring everything to life. These beings that range from giant electricity generating monsters to trains to literal people are the cornerstone of this world and will very much be an important subject going forward. And as a theorist of this game, I take it upon myself to read things so that you don't have to. And one of my most popular series just happens to be Species Explained. And in this series, I went down the line from humans to Vidyadhara to memetic entities, all the way down to Holovians and Pepeshis. I covered them all. And now we have Planarcadia's Imagenae added into the mix. And they deserve their own video. Because these beings are far from simple, and there are way more of them than you think there are. Yes, the ghost people, the cat people, and the bunny people are all Imagenae. But we'll get to that later. So without further ado, allow me to welcome you to Graphia Academy. I'm Nova, your unlicensed substitute teacher for today. Because this is Honkai Star Rail in-game Species Explained. Okay. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to explain the history of what Imagenae are, how they are created, how they work, and then briefly talk about each and every established type of Imagenae. Good? Good. Alright, so our story of this species starts before Graphia. Yes, she invented the art of creating Imagenae called Imagenesis, but this does not mean that she is the first person to ever create an Imagenae. Let me explain. Now, according to the text, the evolution of this species is lost to time, but we do have three hypotheses as to how they came to be. The first is the cellular automation hypothesis posed by the Intelligentsia Guild. This one states that in the era before Graphia, the Phantom Moon would wax full and enable the flow of wish power throughout Planarcadia. And this wish power would flow through the matter of the world and bring things to life. Through a process of power plus substance added to behavioral patterns thought up by people, creating regulated living machines. And these primitive Imagenae would pretty much live until the Phantom Moon games ended and then dissipate. But of course, this would all change when Graphia created Imagenesis and found a way for an Imagenae to sustain their forms by giving them a narrative, or I guess a backstory. And that way they would gain self-awareness and intelligence. So pretty much you give them a meaning to the world that they can go fulfill, and then they can exist. And the second hypothesis comes from the morning actors called the spirit, bone, and flesh hypothesis, which takes the stance that all sentient life is made up of spirit, bone, and flesh, with wish power being the spirit portion, the idea behind them being the bone, and the physical part being the flesh. And as for where Imagenae originate from, they believe that the world of Planarcadia is a primordial soup, or I guess a world that is highly reactive to human imagination. So it was only natural that Imagenae came to life, and by natural selection, the sentient ones only survived. Notice, the morning actor's explanation cuts out all mention of wish power, elation, and Aha's Phantom Moon. So, yeah, they're morning actors. They really don't like the elation. Aha just trolls them, and that's why they're considered elation followers. The last hypothesis is kinda nonsensical, but for the sake of being thorough, I'll just throw this one in there anyway. The cake god hypothesis. And yes, it's as ridiculous as it sounds. One day, during the swarm disaster, Aha baked a cake and combined a bunch of stuff from other aeons to make it, including something from Yaoshi, which it's debated whether they even existed at this time or not. But anyway, they made this aeonic god cake, ate it, loved it, and years later wanted to make another one. So they gathered completely different ingredients and piled them up, and this pile became Planarcadia, and the oven became the Phantom Moon. And thousands of years later, a chef replicated this recipe again with completely different ingredients again to make the cake. And this person was Graphia. Yeah, like I said, it's as dumb as it sounds. Maybe I'm missing some symbolism here, but anyway, that's the three hypotheses for how Imagenae came to be. So let's talk about how they work. Now, this is where things get fascinating because Imagenae have no internal organs or skeleton at all. But if you look for them, they do. Like if you were to give them an X-ray, they would show up in the X-ray, and we have proof of this. And as for mechatrons, they do appear to have wires and mechanical parts that match what you would think they should have, but this is just mimicry, because in reality every Imagenae is the same on the inside. Each and every single one of them is driven by an eternal core that is fueled by wish power from the Phantom Moon as well as human hearts. Their bodies are composed of discrete matter, so nothing special there, but their appearance is entirely decided by the artist that draws them into existence. But going back to their core, this one engine, as it's called, is their one and only crucial internal body part that is responsible for everything. Anything from movement to something as essential as holding their body together, that's the core doing that. And according to the history, these cores can develop naturally and even go rogue or turn into aberrations that build their own body and act on their own. Hence the reason behind the Department of Aberration Defense. Also, it's stated that these aberrations exhibit traits similar to Pathstriders, so I guess if there's something that just comes to life from elation power, that does inherently make it an elation Pathstrider. And this is actually corroborated, because in the modern process of creating Imagenae provided by Graphia, you draw up the concept and the purpose behind it, then inject wish power, and the core forms the instant before the creation comes to life. So they kinda just do have elation power running through their non-existent veins. And of course the IPC perverted this process in some way, but we don't know exactly how because they patented it. Go figure. And as for the core itself, there is really nothing special about it. It's just matter particles that dissipate so fast upon death that you can't really study it. And if you chop the Imagenae in half, you still won't find anything. And as for where the matter that makes up the core originates, there are two theories for that. The path space theory and the discrete matter theory. The first states that wish power comes from Aha's path space, and when an Imagenae dies, it gets returned. And the second suggests that wish power can just convert into matter. Personally, I think it's a little bit of both. I think wish power comes from Aha's path space and then converts into matter and then returns back to Aha when the Imagenae dies. But that's besides the point. Because I guess you're wondering, why can't you just draw up an all-powerful god Imagenae? Well, it's because wish power isn't that abundant anymore. And currently creatures like the Thunder Coils are as strong as modern Imagenae gets. And this is because Planarcadia is losing its imagination. Remember when I said that earlier in the previous video, that the IPC is killing the creativity of Planarcadia and thus weakening its connection to Aha and making the entire world weaker, thus allowing Pearl to take over the Phantom Moon games because Aha's losing interest in it? Anyway, personally, I think that this is the IPC's doing, but that's another thing. Because as the world drifts closer to realism, the imagination of the world matures with it. It's like a child brimming with creativity growing into a boring adult. But there's also another reason. A person needs an appropriate amount of wish power to create a powerful Imagenae. Otherwise, the core won't form properly and they will have broken some laws. So that is a rundown on how Imagenae work. So now we can finally get to the different subspecies of common Imagenae we see around the world. And each one has a bit of a backstory and some have more than others. So let's start off with the ducky people, the Plews. A giant ship crashed spilling a bunch of rubber duckies into the ocean. Yeah, that's one of the simpler ones. A complicated one is these green and purple people called the Orches. And I know they're obviously called orcs, but Orches sounds funnier because they spell it with a CH for some reason. These guys were spawned under the idea of evil outlander barbarians, so they made war with the people of Planarcadia in ancient times. They even established their own empire in the past called the Orch Republic, and the IPC showed up and saved the people, and here's the shocker, actually made peace between the Orch people and the normal humans. I know, I'm just as flabbergasted as you are. Somehow the IPC managed to make peace in this situation, and now the Orch people and the humans live in peace and happiness, with the Orch Republic still existing as a theme park and a residence. They even got to keep their home. Look, I don't know what IPC rep was in charge of this, but they are definitely fired now. Anyway, moving on to the bunny people, They are Imagenae too, and they are called moon lulls. And I lie to you not, this ancient subspecies were created from people not knowing what a rocket was, so they just assumed that it was other stuff stuck into the Phantom Moon, so they settled on bunnies for some reason. And these bunnies eventually evolved into humanoids, and no one knows why. Yeah, you're gonna notice that there is a lot of history of Planarcadia that's just missing, and that's why the history fictionologists got involved. But it's also because the people who won the Phantom Moon games in previous years almost all erased their history of them winning, so we don't really know who ever wins either, but that's besides the point. Moving on to the cat people, these Imagenae are called light paws, and are from the war times of Planarcadia, and are one of the few subspecies of Imagenae created for war that still exist. But of course now they serve other purposes because speed and being nimble are always useful. Next up is the ghost subspecies, which exists but aren't supposed to. They are born from regret and obsession. So if a person were to die during the Phantom Moon games, their intense desires can manifest into a ghost Imagenae that believes they are the person they spawned from, though they aren't at all. Either way, they are still rather useful when given a purpose, because as obsessions, they never stop doing or pursuing whatever it is that they want. Remember that girl who wanted to join the Sinwich Syndicate even after she died during the Ting Yun section of the story? That's what that whole debacle was about. The real girl died, but the ghost Imagenae version of her spawned from her obsession, and she thinks she is the girl. And finally, the last type brought up is the Mechatrons, and these guys are new because the IPC made them not too long ago. According to their size, they help out with all sorts of stuff robots are useful for, like hauling cargo, fighting bad guys, and helping with construction, but apparently true to Planarcadia, their most common job is acting in mech movies and TV shows. And that is just about everything we know about the Imagenae of Planarcadia. It's a little frustrating because a lot of the history is deleted by AHA themselves because people turn into AHA and then delete history for some unknown reason. Hopefully we get a reason for that in the future, but that is all we know about Imagenae in this current moment. Because this is Honkai Star Rail in-game species explained. This is something I am sure will be useful in the future because these creations of Elation really make up a significant number of the population, and Graphia has her name dropped a ton of times in the story already, so I for one believe that knowing about all things Imagenae will be huge for the future going forward. And this also shines a light on how good Sparkle is at Imagenesis, because she made Sparksy, and Sparksy is way stronger and smarter than an average Imagenae. Even her form is unique. So far, there is no mention of a person making an Imagenae body double of themselves. But on a side note, so far nothing has been said about Imagenae leaving Planarcadia, so for now, I don't think they can because Wish Power seems to be a Planarcadia exclusive power source. And I don't believe Imagenae have the ability to draw other Imagenae. So before you get the wrong idea, Sparkle is not an Imagenae herself, she is a human, Sparksy is the Imagenae, and you have now graduated from Graphia Academy. Congratulations! What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.